It took Francis Ngannou less than a full round to dispatch of Renan Ferreira at PFL Battle of the Giants. The Predator was in full of emotions afterwards, revealing that he wasn't even sure that he could compete at all after the loss of his son earlier this year. Well, he did. He still can compete. He did well. Let's react, team. Dan, Tom, lead off, man. What were your thoughts on Francis Ngannou and that vicious slaying of Problema?
Just happy and relieved, I biasly, there's some bias in there, predicted Francis for the win. He was a big favorite, so I guess there's no surprise there, right? But there was a relief. I wrote there's probably as much people worrying about Francis as there are people rooting for him, right? So I think with that dynamic was relief. And then, obviously, which I'm sure we'll get into with his post-fight speech, there was obviously, a lot there under the surface. So I can't help but be happy for him, his team. I got my guy Eric Nixick over there, of course. So yeah, just very happy, very happy.
All right, and Mike, you were there in person. I mean, look at Renan Ferreira's face right there. He looked like a truck ran over him. It took him a while to really clear the cobwebs. I know he reached out to Francis when Francis reached out to him to shake hands, but man, that was some vicious GNP at the end.
Yeah, it was. And from what I had kind of heard throughout the week, this was the game plan for him. They had saw his fight Ferreira against Ante Delea, and obviously I think they found Francis's wrestling and his grappling game a little bit stronger there. So that was the game plan and the path to victory, to test the grappling, and all he really needed was the one takedown, and there you go. So I think it was a pretty fantastic performance for him. The win conquered all in this. He struck with him just long enough to convince them that they were going to strike, and then went to the takedown. It was a thing of beauty, got the job done. So yeah, man, like the win was the ultimate thing. I know we're touting it as the brace for impact, Battle of the Giants. We were expecting a thunderous KO on the feet, but Francis needed the win here. He got it done. So you got to be happy for him to overcome all this adversity. And what he said to us afterwards in the scrum was he admitted he didn't have full confidence coming into this. He didn't know if he still had it coming off of everything that's happened, knee surgery, all these different things. And he comes back and wins. So this is a career highlight for him, given all the circumstances.
Mike, to be clear, are you talking about kind of like that fire in the belly that a fighter needs? He was missing that? Is that what he was saying?
I think a little bit, yeah. And Eric Nixick, I think, just did an interview with MMA Fighting, and he said really like he saw a change in Francis after that final face-off where they went head-to-head and it was like super intense. He said he woke up in that moment, like felt like up to that point he was a little bit just going through the motions, but once that time came, it was ready to fight, and he was back to the guy that they all knew and they all recognized. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine the mental turmoil he was going through. He was very honest about it going in. He didn't know how he would perform. And then this moment we're watching right here, I think, flipped the switch on for him, and it was game over for Renan Ferreira. I think at that point, I don't know if Francis Ngannou would have lost to anyone on this night, given everything he had to fight for in that moment.
Wow, good stuff there. Thank you, Cold Coffee. That's the point, the exact point that Mike's talking about that we're discussing here. Danny Segura, your thoughts, man? React to this fight like. They didn't collide like King Kong and Godzilla, but we got a result, didn't we?
Yeah, and a big question, we'll get into this in a bit, about who's the greatest heavyweight right now, who's the best heavyweight right now. That was surrounding this entire event, right? That was surrounding Francis' return, possibly Pereira's potential, but Ferreira, sorry. But I feel like after watching that performance, like this whole conversation just gets a little bit more difficult. Like Francis Ngannou looked really good, and considering he hadn't fought in MMA in years, he was coming off a knee surgery, a knockout loss to Anthony Joshua in boxing, the loss of his son. I mean, he had the deck stacked against him, and yet he performed very, very well. And not only did he perform well and get a first round finish as we're used to, he showed that wrestling that we saw in his fight before against Cyril Gane. It's here to stay. That's now a fixed part of his arsenal, something that for the entirety of his career we didn't really see. So this is a very scary individual, a more well-rounded and experienced individual, and he could very well be the best heavyweight today. And I guess we'll get into that in a few minutes.
And Danny, you laid it out perfectly. Everything, all those obstacles he had to get past. And let's not forget the free agency, what he had done, because it's the first time coming back to this. You know, I'm sure there's some pressure with that. Did I make the right decision? And, you know, everything you just said laid out perfectly. Goes, what are your thoughts, man? What's your reaction to this huge main event this past Saturday in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think there were so many storylines going in that made this interesting, and I had my emotions going up and down. But once the two fighters got in the cage, I did start to get a little bit, some goosebumps. I think the PFL did a good job of how they promoted it. That promo where they're just destroying a city, I thought that was awesome. And then Francis' performance itself, just blending the arts together, showing us that not only is he back, but he kind of never left, right? The way he looked out there, I thought was pretty good. There's not too much you could nitpick from that performance. The only thing that kind of took away from the performance for me a little bit, or the magnitude of the event, was a little bit of the empty seats. I thought they did a good job making it feel important, but looking out there and seeing some of the empty seats for a fight that can tell so much, right? Who has the baddest man on the planet? That part kind of stung a little bit, but I love what Francis did. And he's just a difficult guy to read. So it's really difficult when he's talking to know what could possibly be next for him, if this is something he wants to continue doing. I hope so. I hope we do get to see more of Francis Ngannou, because I felt like he made a really big statement that night.
All right, and let's get to the question everyone's wondering. You guys are the experts. What is your opinion? Is Francis Ngannou now the baddest man on the planet? Danny Segura, lead things off.
Oh man, I was kind of hoping you'd go with me last, just so I can get a
We'll
few
go with
more
you last.
seconds
All right.
to decipher
Dan,
this.
Tom.
But
All right.
shit,
Are you ready?
I'll go no. But like, it's just so hard. It's just so hard to.
Okay, who is it?
I think it might be Tom Aspinall. I really do think so. I do think if John Jones and Francis Ngannou were to fight right now, I think Ngannou wins. With Tom Aspinall, I would have Aspinall as a favorite. I think everything that Ngannou can do, Aspinall can do just a little bit faster. He just seems a little bit more versatile. But again, that power, I think, starts to level things a little bit. There's no doubt that Ngannou cracks a lot harder than Aspinall at this point. But yeah, it's a very, very tough question, and also a very frustrating one, because I have a feeling we're not going to get an answer to that. Hopefully we do. I don't know how the MMA world can shake things out so we can get some of those fights going, but it's certainly a compelling argument. And if you were to say Ngannou, I don't know what the guys are going to say here, but it's hard to argue against.
All right, Dan Tom, what do you think? Is Francis Ngannou the number one heavyweight in the world, also the baddest man in the world?
I think the answer was yes before that, because he was he's the lineal heavyweight champion there. And the answer is emphatically yes after. I mean, we could talk about the crab ride and the wrist ride in conjunction for that ground and pound finish. You're not seeing that at the heavyweight division. And for as good as Tom Aspinall is, I'm a big Aspinall fan, and my answer would have matched Danny's if Renan Ferreira would have pulled the upset, even though it would have been, I dare say, fair, and I hate to use the word fluky, but I almost dare say fair with the context going in, with it being heavyweight MMA. Even that being said, you got to give credit to the win, and my answer would have matched Danny's in that scenario, but it didn't. Not only did he get the win, he earned the win. He got the emphatic win, no questions, showed technical resolve. And again, guys, I remember listening to MMA Junkie Radio, back in the day when Strikeforce was still active. Remember, Pride was just kind of finishing. Remember all the fun conversations you guys had, right? About who, this, that, who's the best. Guys, Renan Ferreira was the lineal PFL and Bellator champ, right? So Ngannou just unified all the titles. I don't know if people are talking about that enough. Like, forget this, leave someone in a room for 20 minutes talk. He unified all the titles. There's no argument. Sorry.
And the takedown was nice too.
Yeah.
The takedown, the wrist ride, everything. Like, I mean, I didn't see much rust. Mike Bond, what are your thoughts, man? Who's the baddest man on the planet, in your opinion?
Yeah, I side with Dan here. I think he made the great argument. The lineal heavyweight championship for all the major organizations right now is a huge feather in the cap. I think Aspinall versus Ngannou would be a pretty compelling fight. I mean, you could maybe point to the Pavlovich fight for Ngannou or for Aspinall and be like, there's some similarities there a little bit in terms of how it would go. Danny made a great point about the speed, but given resumes, it's got to be Ngannou. Everything he did in the UFC, now this win. None of us are saying John Jones so far, and I think rightfully so. How can you say a guy who has one fight in the division as the best heavyweight in the world a year and a half ago. He might be the best fighter in the world, best pound for pound, all those things, given his entire career body of work. But if you're just talking about heavyweights, I don't see the case for John Jones here. So it comes down to Aspinall versus Ngannou, and I think Ngannou has the more complete resume to this point. Sadly, I don't think we'll ever see them fight. But yeah, Francis, I think he's proved it. He's back. He came here and beat a terrifyingly massive individual with relative ease. So it's got to be him.
It's almost like Aspinall's last win and Francis's last win is making Jones and Miocic look even less relevant coming up here in a few weeks. Goes, how about you, man? Is it what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm gonna side with these guys, but I am gonna half fist bump Danny a little bit because I had the same argument kind of going through my head as well. The one thing that kind of put me over was I thought, well, okay, what could have Francis Ngannou have done to impress me then if Tom Aspinall is my guy? And I thought, well, there's not much more I could have asked from the guy. He went out there, he blended the arts perfectly, he had a great performance. So, by that reasoning, I would have maybe had him drawing dead at that point. And I thought he came in and did a really good job. It really did kind of cement that. But yeah, I think he's the baddest man on the planet. He's shown that he's been able to go through resilience, and not that Tom Aspinall hasn't, right? Coming back from that big injury. But all that talk, and as confident as I am that Francis Ngannou is that guy, if for some reason you did put Aspinall and Ngannou in the same cage, I don't know that I'd right away be marking down Francis Ngannou. I think I'd have to think about it. I'd have to listen to the sharps like Dan, Tom, and hear the analysis on that because I think it would be an incredible matchup. But I do feel like Francis Ngannou is the baddest man on the planet right now, and that's what he's done in mixed martial arts. And don't forget what he did in the boxing ring was pretty damn impressive as well.
George, I'm getting accused of drug use in the chat just because of my Aspinall. Can you believe that? I don't think it's that far-fetched. I do think Aspinall is highly underrated.
Well, Aspinall has like 4 or 5 fights in a row that he's just smashed in the first round for sure. He's a stud. He's a killer. He's younger. But faster. Francis looked like he didn't miss too much of a beat.
No,
yeah, I heard you just say faster. I don't know that that's been shown. Like he's, what are you talking about? Hand speed or just his overall movement?
Hand speed, overall movement. I do think he's a lot faster than Francis Ngannou.
Mm-hmm.
He might be better than him, but we're not basing this just off skills and we're basing off results and things like that. Because John Jones could beat both these guys for all we know, but we haven't seen it, so we kind of have to go off what we've seen. And I think Ngannou.
How about fighter IQ? I think we need to talk about fighter IQ. Francis has used fighter IQ in some of his big fights, round 5 versus Cyril Gane, and now in this fight, and we can't take that away from him. And that's the damn thing of it all. We won't really get to see this fight. Here's some comments from the chat. If it's a good one, we'll put it on. Troll Star, you're going a little overboard, but you did have a good one. I'm gonna put it in here. You said Aspinall would get ragdolled. You didn't add much context past that, but that's your comment. DC7, a guy he's boxing with there in the chat, says Aspinall's the best heavyweight, and this result from Francis was great for him, but it shows that PFL's talent is nowhere near the level of the UFC, with him being the top guy at PFL and got smoked easy. But see, Pavlich got smoked easy by Aspinall. Would you say he's not high level UFC guy? These are heavyweights. The result's always going to be ugly for the loser, so I wouldn't go too far there, DC. I think Renan Ferreira proved, like Dan Tom mentioned, he beat the linear Bellator heavyweight. He went through a season, 4 fights in 1 year and won that, but he just didn't look good against this guy. We have to just do our best to connect the dots. But what's next for Ngannou? We're running a little short on time here. Mike, tell us, what do you think's next for Ngannou? You've heard the most from him pre and post fight out there. This is where they run out, right? Run out of options, because this was the biggest fight they could make, and they just made it.
Yeah, so Ante DeLea weighed in as the backup for this fight. That was kind of flew under the radar a little bit. I don't think he gets it, but then you have the PFL championship next month between Goltsov and Popov. I don't know if they really get it. And I think the other name floating out there that's being mentioned is Vadim Nebkov, right? He is a former Bellator champion. He's moved up to heavyweight. He would probably be quite undersized in that fight, but given skill set for skill set, that's probably the most intriguing matchup. He is, I think, like the highest rated guy out there. So I think if you're going to stick with him, someone on the roster, you're not going to fish a Junior Dos Santos or like some heavyweight that's out there, not signed to this organization right now. I think he's the one. So if it's going to be MMA, I like Nemkov, but maybe this is the time they pull that Deontay Wilder like mixed rules fight out of their back pocket. That had been discussed at one point. Maybe he goes back to boxing and fights someone over there, but I want to see him in MMA. I want to see him where he's made his bones, and the most intriguing fight for me is Nemkov.